Yeah, it is finally happening, folks. After many long years, Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind is getting ready to open. Right now, they are doing previews for the ride. AP's DVC cast members, and I was one of those people who got to ride the ride. Finally! Cosmic Rewind has been one of my most anticipated rides for Walt Disney World in a very, very long time. So in this video, I want to share with you guys my thoughts, my first impressions on experiencing the ride, and also answer any questions you guys might have if you are looking to preview the ride in the next couple days, or if you're gonna be here for grand opening, or if you're gonna ride like at all, because I'll tell you right now, it is seriously awesome. So welcome to the latest episode of Vincent Vision. Wachow! Okay, so just a heads up, this video is going to be spoiler crazy, okay? I'm gonna be going over the pre-show, I'm gonna be going over the ride, over the queue, all that kind of stuff. I'm gonna get really in depth and talk about different aspects of it. So if you don't wanna get spoiled, don't watch this video. I was able to attend a DVC preview for the ride with my friend Alexis. This is us here on the ride with the lights on, which I'll get into a little bit later in the video. We had a time for about 2 o'clock, and when we got there, it was a really long line of people. I was like, oh man, this is gonna be one of those previews where it's super busy, super slammed, but it actually went by pretty fast. The first time, we walked right into the building, the Wonders of Xandar, this brand new Epcot pavilion here, and it was honestly really impressive. They've showed this room off in previews already, but it was so cool to see it in person. It has this giant screen on the top with this sort of video playing, talking about the history of Xandar and the Guardians of the Galaxy. It's a big open room. Not a lot of people were paying attention to the video. It was very in line with a lot of the sort of spacey cues we have seen at Walt Disney World. What was also very cool was the next room, which was the sort of Xandar museum exhibit. There were these little exhibits and displays all about the culture of Xandar, the planet from the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. And it felt like an Epcot exhibit, like it really did. So that was a really cool one. You saw the Guardians of the Galaxy getting interviewed for Good Morning Xandar. It was a really cool queue experience. We also didn't really get to spend much time in there, like we were breezing through. I think when this ride opens, and if it's going well and it's running smooth, you're not gonna spend too much time waiting in one area. And then after that, we got into this like kind of waiting area before we went into the first pre-show. This ride is like Flight of Passage, where there's 2 pre-shows, and I think there are gonna be shows in particular that are cool the first 1 or 2 or 3 times, but then like Flight of Passage, I think you're gonna get a point after your, 3rd or 4th time trying to ride this ride, you're gonna be like, okay, enough with the pre-show, just get me on the ride, okay? Because the ride is where it's at. You see Nova Prime, she shows up and she says, welcome to Xandar, and this is that, and today you're gonna go on a Star Cruiser jump. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. We're gonna take you into this room where we're gonna teleport you on a ship. And then Terry Crews is there and he says, all right guys, come on in this room. You are gonna get teleported to the ship now. So you go in this room and it's this little tiny room. This is a really cool effect. You go in and it starts to hum. There's lots of strobes, so be ready for that. And there's a big flashing bright light. It goes dark for a second. And then when the lights come on, you have been teleported onto the ship in a much bigger room. This is a very cool effect that I have seen at other theme parks, particularly if you are familiar with Poseidon's Fury at Islands of Adventure. This is very, very similar to that effect, where you are in a small room, and then the lights go bright and dark, and then you're in a big room. It's a very cool effect, but it works. It's done instantly as soon as you go into the room, so they really catch you off guard. It's a really cool wow moment, and everyone in the room reacted. And then you go in, you find out there's this big celestial who's trying to destroy the world for whatever reason. I will admit the plot is kind of a little, very, very loose and open-ended, but the Guardians show up because they get called over by the Nova Corps to help them, and then you get sent on your ride. We went and we started going, and this is a lot like Disneyland's Space Mountain, where you kind of start out slow and you go up a small hill, and then eventually you get to the ride. We go up and the Guardians are coming up on all the screens and they're saying, hey, all right guys, get ready. We're gonna go do this. Oh, we're not gonna make it. Ah, yeah, we're gonna make it, blah, 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 blah. And then you go into the room, there's this giant wrapped around screen that you go and you see the big celestial. And then you go back in time and you get launched. There's this really cool effect where it goes, pew, Start to go backwards with all this blue, and that's when your custom song kicks in. I rode 3 times. I got I Ran by Flock of Seagulls twice, and September by Earth, Wind, and Fire. And out of those 2, I really, really enjoyed I Ran So Far Away. I thought I was gonna like September more, but I Ran really, really rocked it. And it's at this moment of the ride that you get what I think is the coolest part of the ride. You get launched backwards, and it's sort of steep. It turns around as you're getting ready to get to the top of the hill, and you see the building for the first time. And you are at the top of this giant building, and you can see all the stars and this giant screen that wraps around the side of the building, and everything on the screen is projected big enough so it looks like it's right in front of you, but you can just tell it's this massive projection. And then the ride really starts to kick in. And at this point, the ride is like Space Mountain at Disneyland, except it's turning every so often. And the ride itself is really, really smooth. You start to go through, you see all these different scenes passing by. You have the sort of space projections that go all over the building. And we were going through, we're having a really great time. It was a lot of fun. And then we got about halfway when it stopped. And we stopped there for like 30 seconds, and then the lights came on, and we got to see the whole show building with all the lights on, and you can see how giant this place was with the giant screens and the giant roller coaster. It was really cool. As a big theme park fan, as a big theme park geek, that's kind of what you want to see. And I was like, oh, darn it, this is my first ride through, and I don't get like a full ride through. That's fine, because it was so cool to see. We sat there for a little while, lights turned off again, and then we just kept on going through the second half of the ride. But it was like this weird, like, we didn't get any music and we didn't move, so we were just going through like a normal roller coaster. And honestly, it was like more intense as a non-spinning roller coaster. There are a lot of banked turns on this ride that I think when you're spinning and getting moved in certain directions, you are not really feeling those forces. And man, just like when it was straight on, that was pretty intense. And then we went to the end. They let us back on through a side door, and we got to fully enjoy the ride as intended. And it was very cool. It was very awesome. This is a really, really great ride. Now, to answer some general questions about previews. I was a tag-along for the DVC preview, so I can't compare it to the annual pass holder preview. There might be some differences. I was not able to get an annual pass holder preview, so I don't really know what it's like on that end. So I'm just gonna share my experience with you guys so you can understand what it might be for you. The line went by pretty darn fast overall. I think the first time we went right into the building, and we only waited about maybe 25-ish minutes getting to the pre-show. And then the second time, the queue was all the way out. It was like fully extended. There's this whole area that they use on the side of the building that's currently just tape lines to move people around with no shade. So like, be ready for that, or I hope that whenever you get to ride the ride, they have umbrellas there, because it is hot and there really is like no shade. So just like, be ready for that, because I anticipate them, even with the boarding group system that the ride is going to open with, I expect them to use that for a while. In this preview, we were able to do re-rides. It was kind of very like mixed responses whenever I would ask cast members if it was available, if it was something we could do. Some cast members said that if the ride breaks down, they won't do re-rides. Some people said you could, but you had to like start at the beginning. It was a whole bunch of different mixed responses. I feel like they're like trying to not advertise re-rides, but this is a check-in window, not necessarily a ride preview window. So once you enter the Guardians of the Galaxy ride area, you stay in that area unless you voluntarily step out. So in theory, you should be able to re-ride the ride up into a certain point. I got off the ride after my third ride through at 5 o'clock, and they had told me that they cut off the line at 4:45. So they will stop letting people in at a certain point. They're not just gonna keep it open the whole day. The gift shop is not available, Treasures of Xandar, so you're not able to use that. And I do believe they were using the Lightning Lane for DAS passes and Child Swap, so those lines are getting used for that reason specifically. And as far as general questions for the ride itself goes, I guess the biggest one on a lot of people's minds is this ride really intense? I am a little bit. It's like mid-level. It is not a full-on intense roller coaster, but it has moments of intensity. There aren't any big drops, it doesn't go upside down, but there are some fast banked turns that as the roller coaster is moving while you're doing those turns, you do really kind of feel a little intense. I would say the closest comparison to this ride is something like Space Mountain at Disneyland. Like if Space Mountain had a launch, this is like pretty much it. And it turned as well. It's called a spinning coaster. It does not spin, okay? There's not moments where you're like, woo, 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 spinning like the teacups or anything crazy like that. At least from what I felt. The whole ride was in the dark anyway, so you couldn't really like tell exactly where you were going and how you were moving around. But in my opinion, I did not find the ride to be the most intense ride at Disney World by any means. I think Rock and Roller Coaster is still more intense. I think Expedition Everest is still more intense. I think the sensations that you feel falling on the Tower of Terror are still more intense than Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. And it's not to say that it didn't like make it on the list. It's definitely like on like the top 5 or 6 most intense rides at Disney World, but I do think it kind of sits on the lower end of that because it is so smooth. It's amazing. It really does feel like you're flying through space at certain points throughout this ride. It is so cool the way the ride is designed and the way it moves around. It really is impressive. And I would say if you think you can do this, if you don't get really dizzy on these rides, this could be like a one and done. This could be like you do it once. I personally am pretty comfortable with rides. I don't really get dizzy on simulators or anything like that. I can get headaches on roller coasters if I ride them too much, but this one is really smooth, so I'm not worried about that at all. But if you are someone who gets kind of skittish on these types of simulated screens and things like that, this is probably like a one and done. Like you do it once, but don't do it twice. It's also a 42-inch height requirement, which is pretty low, and that should give you an idea of like what to expect as far as intensity goes. I believe Rock and Roller Coaster is 48 inches, so you know, your kid can be smaller than that and they can go on Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, is this the best ride at Walt Disney World? That is tough to say as well. I think it's really common for these types of previews, especially when like cast members and people who get an early chance to ride this ride will often proclaim, "This is the best ride Disney has ever made." That happens a lot. This is definitely like in my top 3. Like what my top 3 are, I don't really figure it out. I know Space Mountain used to be on my top 3, but as soon as I got off of this ride, I kicked it off the list and put in Cosmic Rewind. This is just like what happened when I rode Mission Breakout in California. I was so in love with that ride that as soon as I came back to the Tower of Terror here in Orlando, it just wasn't the same. I'm sorry. I think Mission Breakout is so much better than Tower of Terror here in Hollywood Studios. I don't care. Fight me. It's just so much more fun. It's so much more fun. It's so re-rideable with all the different songs, and that is what this ride has going for it as well. It is re-rideable. All the different songs make the ride so much fun. It's a different experience every time. Apparently there's like different quips and things like that that the Guardians say throughout the ride. I really couldn't hear that because everyone was screaming and singing the songs and the music was so loud you couldn't really hear the dialogue on the ride too much, but it was there. It is a really fun, funny ride, and it is a really great addition to Epcot. It is a certified hit. I love it. But as far as my thoughts on the ride go, I think that's really all I've got to say right now as far as first thoughts go. I am going to have other opportunities to ride this ride leading up to the grand opening day where I will be there as well. So please be on the lookout on my channel for a video of the grand opening day because that is going to be madness, I could imagine. Even with the boarding group system that will be opening with the ride, I can still imagine it's going to be a really fun, crazy, hectic day. Kind of like the Guardians of the Galaxy. And I will be doing a video comparing Disney's newest story coaster to Universal's original story coaster, Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure. The battle of the story coasters. Which one will win? You'll just have to watch that video to find out. And when I make a decision in my head. But until then, I hope you guys enjoyed this quick first impressions overview. What are your thoughts on Cosmic Rewind? If you have done the ride, I would love to hear them. What songs did you get on the ride? I would love to hear that as well, because this is a really great ride and it is a lot of fun, and whoever is going to ride this in the future, I'm excited for you to do it. It truly is one of the best new additions here at Walt Disney World. Until then, that is all I've got. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you out in the Guardians of the Galaxy space world. Goodbye. Wow. That was supposed to be my Rocket Raccoon impression. It was pretty awful, wasn't it? Bye-bye. I am Groot.